Now, many Muslims share Osama bin Laden's view that Islam is under attack and the United States is their enemy. Those are the findings of an American think tank after conducting a poll in 4 Islamic countries: Egypt, Morocco, Pakistan and Indonesia. Well, 70% of those questioned believe that the key goal of US foreign policy is to weaken and divide the Islamic world. An even bigger majority want American military bases and troops to pull out from Islamic countries, and half of them support attacks against American troops in Iraq, Afghanistan and the Gulf. Now, while the feelings about Al-Qaeda were complex, a large majority agreed with the goals of the terrorist group, although they rejected attacks on civilians. And while there was strong support for enhancing the role of Islam in their society, the majority were against a policy of isolationism. Well, the survey was commissioned by the National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terror, which is a centre of excellence connected to the US Department of Homeland Security. And to discuss the findings further, I'm joined now in the studio by Dr. Parvez Ahmed, who's the president of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, and Adam Early, who's a senior advisor for the US State Department, who's also in Doha. If I could come to you first of all, are you surprised by these findings?
No, they're not surprising at all. I mean, there have been many polls that have been showing similar results of widespread discontentment in the Muslim and Arab world about American foreign policy, and the perception that the war on terror has become a war on Islam.
Adam Early, if I could come to you, it's pretty damning findings, and after all, you've been trying to persuade people that the United States is doing a good job out there. They don't seem to agree.
You're right. I mean, it's and as the doctor said, it's not really new. I mean, we've been seeing these kinds of attitudes for some time. And what does it tell us? It tells us we really have our work cut out for us. I mean, what's kind of disturbing really about this is if you look at the United States and the way the United States deals with Muslims in its own society, they're often free. As a general rule, they're more free and to practice their religion. They're more integrated into society than they are in Islamic and Muslim society. So that's really one of these big ironies. The other thing that's really interesting is, you know, the fact that of all the nations in the world, who's done more for oppressed Muslim populations than the United States? I mean, if you look at what we did in Kosovo, if you look at what we're doing in Darfur, if you look at what we did in Afghanistan to free the people of Afghanistan from a very brutal and medieval regime. And I think if you ask the people of Afghanistan is, would you rather live under the Taliban or would you rather live under the government you have now, you'd probably get a very positive answer about the government they have now. But at the same time, they don't connect that with the United States. So it's just interesting sort of what the thought process is behind these questions and behind these answers.
Dr. Ahmed, I mean, a lot of aid is given out by the United States, and yet people seem to perceive them as enemies of Islam. Why is that?
Yeah, when the U.S. engages in positive diplomacy like they did in Indonesia after the tsunami crisis, the approval rating of U.S. shot through the roofs. I think it doubled or tripled in a very short period of time. But when U.S. policy is leading to killings and bombings, as in Iraq, or the continued occupation, as in Palestine, or even in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is reforming and there is a lot of violence, or the U.S. is not engaging with the democratic regimes. We're talking about democratization in the Middle East, but the most freely and fairly elected government in the Middle East, which is the Palestinian government, the U.S. government is not engaging with them. These kind of things create the perception that we're seeing today.
Adam Early, one of the big problems for you surely is the situation in Iraq, and even within America itself, Congress is saying that the president's policies have failed in Iraq and they want to try and withdraw the troops. Presumably that doesn't help the general perception of what the United States is trying to do.
Well, yeah, but I would agree with the doctor from CAIR. This problem is much bigger than Iraq. And this is basically a problem of people feeling that they are the victims of injustice, whether it be in Pakistan or Egypt or Morocco or wherever you ask people, about their lot in life and the way the world is, they feel that there's great injustice, particularly on issues that Muslims care about.
Let me stop you briefly.
And they blame us.
So you mentioned Egypt there. Egypt is one of your key allies in the region, and there's been more than $50 billion of US aid poured into the country since 1975. So why do people still have a negative view of the United States?
Well, because the situation in Egypt is pretty desperate for a lot of people, and there's a huge lack of political space, and there's a huge lack of opportunity, and there's a great disconnect between the rhetoric and the reality. And they blame us for that because America stands for what they aspire to. It stands for freedom, it stands for prosperity, it stands for opportunity. And when America promises and they see us as not delivering, then I think they're disappointed, they're deceived, they're angry. And you can apply that to whatever the issue is, whether it's the Palestinian issue, or whether it's the Iraq issue, or whether it's that political opportunity issue. And so we've got, like I said, we've got our job cut out for us, not only to continue to I think, represent and advance and advocate the values that we all share, whether we're Muslim or Christian or Jewish, but actually to put our diplomatic and political muscle behind that rhetoric and try to achieve a better life for the people who feel oppressed and disadvantaged.
Dr. Ahmed, you're nodding there.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good points that he's making. I think the first thing is to recognize, what the U.S. government needs to do is to recognize that there is a big paradigm shift in the Muslim world. The population is young, it's restless, it is more religiously oriented. This religiosity needs to be engaged. It should not be marginalized, should not be shunned, it needs to be engaged. Number 2 point, U.S. foreign policy needs to return to its core values, the American core values of diplomacy, dignity, and dialogue. And number 3, the American Muslim community, just as Adam said, is an integrated community. It's a well-educated community. It has deep roots in the Muslim world. It has deep understanding of the American society. They are the perfect vehicle to bridge the gap between America and the Muslim world.
Adam, earlier talk about diplomacy there, but you've had recently a series of politicians touring the region, and it would appear that their impact isn't as great as perhaps you would expect it to be.
Well, I mean, this is not the kind of thing you can measure in terms of diplomatic visits. We've got people in the region all the time. Secretary Rice has been to the occupied territories in Israel and Jordan, Egypt, I think 5 times in the last 8 months. So this is, and as Dr. Parvez said, this is a generational issue, and it's going to take generations, or at least decades, to, I think, attenuate a lot of the anger that's out there. But we recognize that extremism is born of frustration, and we have to attack the root causes of that frustration if we are to deal effectively with the anger that expresses itself in violence.
Yeah,
and unless we're going to be the targets of it.
Yeah.
Just very quickly.
Yeah, sure. What we need is a diplomatic surge, not a troop surge in the Muslim world.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Parvez Ahmed from the Council on American Islamic Relations, and Adam Early, Senior Advisor for the U.S. State Department.
Thank you.